Exodus. Chapter 1. These were the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob, who came with him to Egypt along with their families: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. Jacob had 70 descendants there, including Joseph, who was already in Egypt. Eventually Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. However, the Israelites had many children, and their numbers increased rapidly. In fact, there were so many of them that they became very powerful. The country was full of them. Then a new king came to power who didn't know anything about Joseph. He conferred with his fellow Egyptians and said, "Look at these Israelites. There are more than them than us, and they're more powerful than us. We've got to make a plan to deal with them before they become so many that if there's a war, they'll side with our enemies and fight us and flee the country." So the Egyptians made them do forced labor and put taskmasters in charge of them. They used them to build the storage towns of Pithom and Ramesses. But the more the Israelites were mistreated, the more they grew in numbers and spread out, and the more the Egyptians detested them. The Egyptians worked the Israelites brutally, making their lives a misery. They made them do hard labor, building with mortar and brick, and all kind of heavy work in the fields. In all of this hard labor, they treated them brutally. Then the king gave orders to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. He told them, "When you assist the Hebrew women during childbirth, if you see it's a boy, kill him, but if it's a girl, let her live." But because the midwives revered God, they didn't do what the king of Egypt had ordered. They let the boys live as well. The king of Egypt called the midwives in and demanded to know, "Why have you done this, letting the male children live?" "Hebrew women aren't like Egyptian women," the midwives told Pharaoh. "They give birth more easily. They have them before we midwives arrive." God treated the midwives well, and the people increased in number, so there were even more of them. Because the midwives revered God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh issued this order to all his people: "Throw every Hebrew boy that's born into the Nile, but let every girl live." Exodus. Chapter 2. It was around this time that a man from the tribe of Levi married a woman, also a Levite. She became pregnant and had a son. She saw he was a lovely baby, and she hid him for 3 months. But when she couldn't hide him anymore, she got a papyrus basket and covered it with tar and pitch. Then she put her baby in the basket and placed it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister waited some distance away, keeping an eye on him. Then Pharaoh's daughter arrived to bathe in the Nile. Her ladies-in-waiting were walking along the bank of the river. When she saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it and bring it to her. When she opened it, she saw the baby boy. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This must be one of the Hebrew boys," she said. His sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse him for you?" "Yes, go and do that," she replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother to come. "Take this baby boy and nurse him for me," she told his mother. "I will pay you myself." So his mother took him home and nursed him. When the boy was older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She called him Moses, because she said, "I pulled him out of the water." Later, when Moses had grown up, he went to visit his people, the Hebrews. He saw them doing hard labor. He also saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. He looked all around to make sure no one was watching, and then he killed the Egyptian and buried his body in the sand. The following day he went back, and he saw 2 Hebrews fighting with each other. He said to the one at fault, "Why are you beating one of your own people?" "Who put you in charge to judge us?" the man replied. "Are you going to kill me like you did the Egyptian?" Moses became frightened at this and said to himself, "People know what I've done." When Pharaoh found out, he tried to have Moses killed, but Moses ran away from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian. One day, as he was sitting by a well, and the Midianite priest's 7 daughters came to fetch water to fill up the troughs so their father's flock could drink. Some shepherds arrived and chased them off, but Moses intervened and rescued them and watered their flock. When they got home, their father Reuel asked them, "How did you get back so quickly today?" "An Egyptian rescued us from some shepherds who attacked us," they replied. Then he even fetched water for us so the flock could drink. So where is he? Reuel asked his daughter. You didn't just leave him there, did you? Go and invite him to eat with us. Moses agreed to stay with the man who arranged for his daughter Zipporah to marry Moses. She had a son, and Moses named him Gershom, for he said, I'm an exile living in a foreign country. Years later, the king of Egypt died, but the Israelites were still groaning under their hard labor. Their cries for help because of their hardship reached God. God heard their groans and recalled his agreement with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God also looked sympathetically on the Israelites and was concerned for them. Exodus. Chapter 3. Moses was a shepherd looking after the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the Midianite priest. He led the flock far into the wilderness until he came to God's mountain, Mount Horeb. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from inside a bush. Moses looked carefully and saw that though the bush was on fire, it wasn't being burned up. Let me go over and take a look, Moses said to himself. It's very odd to see a bush that's not burning up. When the Lord saw that Moses was coming to take a look, God called him from inside the bush. Moses, Moses, I'm here, Moses replied. Don't come any closer, God told him. Take off your sandals because you're standing on holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. I'm completely aware of the misery of my people in Egypt, the Lord told him. I have heard them crying out because of their taskmasters. I know how much they're suffering. That's why I have come down to rescue them from Egyptian oppression and to take them up from that country to a productive, wide-open land, a land flowing with milk and honey, where currently the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites are living. Listen, the cries of the Israelites have reached me, and I have seen how badly the Egyptians are mistreating them. Now you must leave, because I'm sending you to Pharaoh to lead my people Israel out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Why me? I'm a nobody. I couldn't go to Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of Egypt. I'll be with you, the Lord replied, and this will be the sign that it is really me who is sending you. When you have led the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. Then Moses said to God, Look, if I were to go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am is who I am. Tell the Israelites this, I am has sent me to you. Then God said to Moses, Tell the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you are to call me for all generations to come. Go and call all the elders of Israel to meet with you. Tell them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, has appeared to me, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He said, I have paid close attention to what's been happening to you in Egypt. I have decided to take you away from the misery you're having in Egypt and bring you to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will accept what you say. Then you must go with them to the king of Egypt and tell him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has revealed himself to us. So please let us go 3 days' journey into the desert so we can offer sacrifices to the Lord our God there. But I know that the king of Egypt won't let you go unless he's forced to do so by a power stronger than him. So I will use my power to inflict on Egypt all the terrifying things that I'm about to do to them. After that, he'll let you go. I will make the Egyptians treat you well as a people. So when you go, you won't leave empty-handed. Every woman will ask her neighbor as well as any woman living in her house for silver and gold jewelry and clothing, and put them on your sons and daughters. In this way you will take the wealth of the Egyptians with you. Exodus chapter 4. But what if they don't believe me or listen to what I say? Moses asked. They could say, The Lord didn't appear to you. The Lord asked him, What are you holding in your hand? A walking stick, Moses replied. Throw it on the ground, he told Moses. So Moses did. It turned into a snake, and Moses ran away from it. Reach out and grab hold of it by its tail, the Lord told Moses. Moses did so, and it turned back into a walking stick in his hand. You are to do this so that they will believe that I, the Lord, did appear to you, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Then the Lord told him, "Put your hand inside your clothes close to your chest." So Moses did as he was told. When he took his hand out, it was white like snow with a skin disease. "Now put your hand back inside your clothes," the Lord said. Moses did so. When he took it out again, his hand had returned to normal. "If they don't believe you and they're not convinced by the first sign, they'll believe because of the second sign," the Lord explained. "But if they still don't believe you or listen to you because of these two signs, then you are to take some water from the Nile and pour it out on the ground. The Nile water will turn into blood on the ground." Then Moses said to the Lord, "Please excuse me, but I'm not someone who is good with words, not in the past, and not from the time you've been speaking with me, your servant. My speech is slow and I don't say things well." "Who gave people mouths?" the Lord asked him. "Who makes people deaf or dumb, able to see or blind? It's I, the Lord, who does that. Now go, and I myself will be your mouth, and I will tell you what you are to say." "Please, Lord, send someone else," Moses responded. The Lord got angry with Moses and told him, "There's your brother Aaron, the Levite. I know he speaks well. He's on his way to meet you, and he'll be very happy to see you. Speak to him and tell him what to say. I will be your mouth and his mouth, and I will tell you what you are to do. Aaron will speak on your behalf to the people, as if he was your mouth, and you will be in the place of God to him. Make sure to take your walking stick with you so you can use it to do the signs." Then Moses returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and told him, "Please allow me to go back to my own people in Egypt so I can see if any of them are still alive." "Go with my blessing," Jethro replied. While Moses was in Midian, the Lord told him, "Go back to Egypt because all those who wanted to kill you have died." Moses put his wife and sons on a donkey and went back to Egypt, carrying the walking stick that God had used to perform miracles. The Lord told Moses, "When you get back to Egypt, make sure to go to Pharaoh and carry out the miracles I've given you to do. I will make him stubborn, and he will not let the people go. This is what you are to tell Pharaoh. This is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son. I ordered you to let my son go so he can worship me, but you refused to release him, so I will now kill your firstborn son." But while they were on their way, the Lord came to the place where they were staying, wanting to kill Moses. However, Zipporah used a flint knife to cut off her son's foreskin. She touched his feet with it and said to him, "You are a blood husband to me." Calling him a blood husband referred to circumcision. After this, the Lord left Moses alone. The Lord had told Aaron, "Go and meet Moses in the desert." So Aaron went and met Moses at the mountain of God and greeted him with a kiss. Then Moses explained to Aaron everything the Lord had sent him to say and all the miracles he had ordered him to do. Moses and Aaron traveled to Egypt. There they had all the Israelite elders gathered together. Aaron shared with them everything the Lord had told Moses, and Moses carried out the miracles so they could see them. The Israelites were convinced. When they heard that the Lord had come to them and that he had been touched by their suffering, they bowed their heads and worshipped. Exodus chapter 5. After this, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and told him, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go so they can hold a religious festival for me in the desert." "Who is this Lord that I should listen to his request to let Israel go?" Pharaoh replied. "I don't know the Lord, and I certainly won't let Israel leave. The God of the Hebrews came to us," they added. "Please allow us to go a 3 days' journey into the desert and offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. Otherwise he'll kill us by disease or by the sword." "Moses and Aaron, why are you trying to take people away from their assigned labor?" Pharaoh asked. "Get back to work," he ordered. "Look here," he went on. "There are many of your people here in our country, and you are preventing them from doing their assigned labor." That very day he ordered the slave drivers and those in charge of the people, "Don't give them any more straw to make bricks like before. Have them go and collect the straw themselves, but still make them produce the same quantity of bricks as before. They're lazy people. That's why they're calling out, asking, 'Please let us go and offer sacrifices to our God.' Make their work harder so they can get on with it and not pay any attention to all these lies. So the slave drivers and those in charge went out and told the people, "This is what Pharaoh has ordered. I won't give you any more straw. Go and get straw for yourselves wherever you can find it, because your work quota won't be reduced." So the people went all over Egypt collecting stubble for straw. The slave drivers kept on forcing them, saying, "You still have to do the same work as you did when you had straw provided." They beat the Israelite supervisors they had put in charge, shouting at them, "Why haven't you met your quota of bricks as you did before?" The Israelite supervisors went to Pharaoh to complain, saying, "Why are you treating us, your servants, like this? You don't give us any straw, but your slave drivers demand that we make bricks, and they beat us. Your people are treating us badly." "No, you're just lazy people," Pharaoh replied. "That's why you keep on asking, 'Please let us go and offer sacrifices to the Lord.' Now get out of here and go back to work. You won't be given any straw, but you'll still have to produce the full quota of bricks." The Israelite supervisors realized they were in trouble when they were told, "You must not reduce the daily production of bricks." They went over to Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them after their meeting with Pharaoh, and said, "May the Lord see what you have done and judge you accordingly. You have made us like a bad smell to Pharaoh and his officials. You have put a sword in their hands to kill us." Moses went back to the Lord and complained, "Why have you caused all this trouble for your own people, Lord? Was this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak for you, he has been even harder on your people, and you haven't done anything to save them." Exodus chapter 6. But the Lord told Moses, "Now you'll see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh. Using my great strength, I will force him to let them go. Because of my power, he will send them out from his country." God spoke to Moses and told him, "I am Yahweh. I revealed myself as God Almighty to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, but they didn't know my name, Yahweh. I also confirmed my solemn agreement with them to give them the land of Canaan, the country where they were living as foreigners. In addition, I've heard the groans of the Israelites that the Egyptians are treating as slaves, and I haven't forgotten the agreement I promised them. So tell the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will save you from the forced labor the Egyptians are making you do. I will set you free from being their slaves. I will rescue you using my power and imposing heavy punishments. I will make you my own people. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who rescued you from slavery in Egypt. I will take you to the land that I solemnly promised to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you to own. I am the Lord." Moses explained this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because they were so discouraged and because of the hard labor they were forced to do. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go and speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Tell him to let the Israelites leave his country." But Moses replied, "Even my own people don't listen to me. Why would Pharaoh listen to me, especially since I'm such a poor speaker?" But the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and told them what to do regarding the people of Israel and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, in order to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. These were the Israelite family heads. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn son of Israel, were Hanok and Palu, Hezron and Carmi. These were the families of Reuben. The sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These were the families of Simeon. These were the names of the sons of Levi according to their genealogical records: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Levi lived for 137 years. The sons of Gershon by families were Libni and Shimei. The sons of Kohath were Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Kohath lived for 133 years. The sons of Merari were Mali and Mushi. These were the families of the Levites according to their genealogical records. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, and she had their sons Aaron and Moses. Amram lived for 137 years. The sons of Izhar were Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri. The sons of Uzziel were Mishael, Elzaphan, and Sithri. Aaron married Elisheba, daughter of Aminadab and sister of Nahshon. She had their sons Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar. The sons of Korah were Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph. These were the Korahite families. Eleazar, son of Aaron, married one of the daughters of Putiel, and she had their son Phinehas. These are the ancestors of the Levite families, listed according to their clans. Eleazar, son of Aaron, married one of the daughters of Putiel, and she gave birth to his son Phinehas. These are the heads of the Levite families, listed by family. Aaron and Moses mentioned here are the ones the Lord told, "Lead the Israelites out of Egypt, divided up in their respective tribes." Moses and Aaron were also the ones who went to speak with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about the Israelites leaving Egypt. When the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, he said to him, "I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I tell you." But Moses replied, "I'm not a good speaker. Why would Pharaoh listen to me?" Exodus chapter 7. The Lord told Moses, "Look, I will make you seem like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to repeat everything that I tell you to say, and your brother Aaron must repeat it to Pharaoh so that he will let the Israelites leave his country. But I will give Pharaoh a stubborn attitude, and though I will perform many signs and wonders in Egypt, he won't listen to you. Then I will attack Egypt, imposing heavy punishments on them, and I will lead out by their tribes my people, the Israelites. In this way the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, when I take action against Egypt and lead the Israelites out of the country." Moses and Aaron did exactly as the Lord had ordered. Moses was 80, and Aaron was 83 when they went and spoke to Pharaoh. The Lord told Moses and Aaron, "When Pharaoh asks you, why don't you perform a miracle then? Tell Aaron, take your walking stick and throw it down in front of Pharaoh, and it will turn into a snake." Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did what the Lord had ordered. Aaron threw down his staff in front of Pharaoh and his officials, and it turned into a snake. But Pharaoh called in wise men and sorcerers, and these Egyptian magicians did the same thing using their magic arts. Each of them threw down their walking sticks, and they also turned into snakes. But Aaron's walking stick swallowed up all their walking sticks. But Pharaoh had a hard, stubborn attitude, and he wouldn't listen to them, as the Lord had predicted. The Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh has a stubborn attitude. He's refusing to let the people go. So tomorrow morning go to Pharaoh as he walks down to the river. Wait to meet him on the bank of the Nile. Take with you the walking stick that turned into a snake. Tell him, 'The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to say to you, let my people go so that they can worship me in the desert. But you have not listened up until now. This is what the Lord is now telling you. This is how you will know that I am the Lord. Watch. Using the walking stick I'm holding, I'm going to hit the water of the Nile, and it will turn to blood. The fish in the Nile will die, the river will smell, and the Egyptians won't be able to drink any of its water." The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, take your walking stick in your hand and hold it out over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers and canals and ponds and pools, so that they will turn to blood. There will be blood through all of Egypt, even in containers made of wood and stone." Moses and Aaron did exactly as the Lord had ordered. While Pharaoh and all his officials watched, Aaron lifted up his walking stick and hit the water of the Nile. Immediately, the whole river turned to blood. The fish in the Nile died, and the river smelled so awful that the Egyptians could not drink its water. There was blood through all of Egypt. But the Egyptian magicians did the same thing using their magic arts. Pharaoh maintained his stubborn attitude, and he wouldn't listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had predicted. Pharaoh went back to his palace and didn't pay any attention to what had happened. All the Egyptians dug alongside the Nile because they couldn't drink its water. 7 days went by after the Lord hit the Nile. Exodus chapter 8. Then the Lord told Moses, "Go and see Pharaoh and say to him, 'This is what the Lord says, let my people go so that they can worship me. If you refuse to let them leave, I will send a plague of frogs all over your country. They will swarm out of the Nile, and they will enter your palace and get into your bedroom and jump onto your bed. They will get into the houses of your officials and jump around your people, even into your ovens and bread-making bowls. Frogs will jump all over you, your people, and all your officials." The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, hold out your walking stick in your hand over the rivers and canals and ponds, and make frogs spread over Egypt." So Aaron held out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and frogs came up and covered the land. But the Egyptian magicians did the same thing using their magic arts. They brought up frogs in Egypt. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and pleaded with them, "Pray to the Lord and ask him to take away the frogs from me and my people. Then I will let your people go so they can offer sacrifices to the Lord. You may have the honor of deciding when I'll pray for you, your officials, and your people, that the frogs will be removed from you and your houses. They will remain only in the Nile." "Do it tomorrow," Pharaoh replied. Moses said, "It will happen as you have requested, so you will know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials, and your people, and they will remain only in the Nile." Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, and Moses pleaded with the Lord about the frogs he had sent against Pharaoh. The Lord did as Moses asked. The frogs in the houses, the courtyards, and the fields died. The people collected them in pile upon pile, and the whole country smelled terrible. But when Pharaoh realized the plague had passed, he chose to become hard and stubborn again, wouldn't listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had predicted. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, pick up your walking stick and hit the dust of the ground. The dust will become gnats swarming all over Egypt." They did what the Lord said. When Aaron lifted up his walking stick and hit the dust of the earth, gnats swarmed over both people and animals. The dust in the whole of Egypt turned into gnats. The magicians also tried to make gnats using their magic arts, but they couldn't. The gnats stayed on both people and animals. "This is an act of God," the magicians told Pharaoh. But Pharaoh chose to be stubbornly hard-hearted, and he wouldn't listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had predicted. The Lord told Moses, "Tomorrow morning get up early and block Pharaoh's way as he walks down to the river. Tell him, this is what the Lord says, 'Let my people go so that they can worship me. If you don't let my people leave, I will send swarms of flies on you and your officials, and on your people and your houses. Every Egyptian house and even the ground on which they stand will be filled with swarms of flies. However, on this occasion I will treat the land of Goshen differently. That's where my people live. There won't be any swarms of flies there. This is how you will know that I, the Lord, am here in your country. I will distinguish my people from your people. You will see this sign that confirms it tomorrow." The Lord did what he had said. Huge swarms of flies swept into Pharaoh's palace and into the houses of his officials. The whole of Egypt was devastated because of these swarms of flies. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and told them, "Go and offer sacrifices to your God here in this country." "No, that wouldn't be the right thing to do," Moses replied. "The sacrifices we offer to the Lord our God would be offensive to Egyptians. If we went ahead and offered sacrifices offensive to Egyptians, they'd stone us. We must make a 3-day journey into the wilderness and offer sacrifices there to the Lord our God as he has told us. I'll let you go and offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the desert, but don't go very far," Pharaoh answered. "Now pray for me that this plague ends." "As soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord," Moses replied. "And tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh and his officials and his people. But Pharaoh should be sure not to be deceitful again and refuse to let the people go and offer sacrifices to the Lord." Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord did as Moses asked, and removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Not a single fly remained. But once again Pharaoh chose to be stubbornly hard-hearted and would not let the people leave. Exodus. Chapter 9. The Lord told Moses, "Go and speak to Pharaoh. Tell him, this is what the Lord says, 'Let my people go so that they can worship me. If you refuse to let them go and keep holding on to them, I will punish you by bringing a very severe plague on your livestock, on your horses, donkeys, camels, herds, and flocks. But the Lord will distinguish between the livestock of the Israelites and the Egyptians, so that none of those belonging to the Israelites will die. The Lord has set a time, saying, Tomorrow, this is what is going to happen here in the country." The following day the Lord did what he had said. All the Egyptians' livestock died, but not a single animal belonging to the Israelites died. Pharaoh sent out officials and discovered that not a single one of the Israelites' livestock had died. But Pharaoh was stubborn and he would not let the people leave. The Lord told Moses and Aaron, "Go and get some handfuls of soot from a furnace. Then have Moses throw it into the air in front of Pharaoh. It will spread like fine dust over the whole country of Egypt, and open sores will break out on people and animals throughout the land." They got soot from a furnace and went to see Pharaoh. Moses threw it into the air, and open sores broke out on people and animals. The magicians were unable to come and appear before Moses, because they and all the other Egyptians were covered in sores. But the Lord gave Pharaoh a stubborn attitude, and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had told Moses. The Lord told Moses, "Tomorrow morning get up early and go to Pharaoh and tell him that this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so that they can worship me. This time I will direct all my plagues against you and your officials and your people, so you will realize that there is no one like me in all the earth. By now I could have reached out to strike you and your people with a plague that would have completely destroyed you. However, I have let you live so you can see my power, and that my reputation may be spread throughout the earth. But in your pride you are still tyrannizing my people, and refuse to let them leave. So watch out. About this time tomorrow, I will send down the worst hailstorm that has ever fallen on Egypt, from the beginning of its history until now. So order your livestock and everything you have in the field to be brought inside. Every person and every animal that stays outside and is not brought inside will die when the hail falls on them." Those of Pharaoh's officials who took seriously what the Lord said rushed to bring their servants and livestock inside. But those who didn't care what the Lord said left their servants and livestock outside. The Lord told Moses, "Lift your hand towards the sky so that a hailstorm will fall over the whole of Egypt, on people and on animals, and on everything growing in the fields of Egypt." Moses held up his staff toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail and made lightning hit the ground. This is how the Lord rained hail down on Egypt. As the hail fell, it was accompanied by lightning flashing back and forth. The hail that fell was so severe that nothing like it had ever been seen in the whole of Egypt since the beginning of its history. All across Egypt, hail hit everything in the fields, both people and animals. It knocked down everything growing in the fields and stripped every tree bare. Only in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, was there no hail. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and told them, "I admit that I sinned this time. The Lord is right, and I and my people are wrong. Pray to the Lord for us, because there's been more than enough of God's thunder and hail. I will let you leave. You don't need to stay here any longer. Once I've left the city, I will pray to the Lord for you," Moses told them. "The thunder will stop, and there will be no more hail, so that you will realize that the earth belongs to the Lord. But I know you and your officials still do not really respect the Lord our God. The flax and barley were destroyed because the barley was ripe and the flax was flowering. However, the wheat and the spelt were not destroyed because they grow later." Moses left Pharaoh and went out of the city and prayed to the Lord. The thunder and hail stopped and the rainstorm finished. When Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunder had stopped, he sinned again, and he chose to become stubborn again, along with his officials. Because of his stubborn attitude, Pharaoh would not let the Israelites leave, just as the Lord had predicted through Moses. Exodus chapter 10. The Lord told Moses, "Go and see Pharaoh, because it was me who gave him and his officials a stubborn attitude so that I may perform my miracles before them. This is so you can tell your children and grandchildren how I made the Egyptians look foolish by doing these miracles among them, and so that you may know that I am the Lord." Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and told him, "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says, 'How long are you going to refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they can worship me. If you refuse to let my people leave, tomorrow I will send a plague of locusts into your country. There will be so many of them that they'll cover the ground so no one can see it. They will eat whatever crops were left by the hail, as well as every tree growing in your fields. They will swarm into your houses and into the houses of all your officials, in fact, into the houses of every Egyptian. This is something that none of your forefathers ever saw from the time they arrived in this country." Then Moses and Aaron turned and left Pharaoh. Pharaoh's officials came to him and asked, "How long are you going to let this man cause us trouble? Let these people go so they can worship the Lord their God. Don't you realize that Egypt has been destroyed?" Moses and Aaron were brought back to see Pharaoh. "Go and worship the Lord your God," he told them. "But who of you will be going?" "We will all go," Moses replied, "young and old, sons and daughters, and we'll take our flocks and herds with us, for we're going to have a religious festival for the Lord." "The Lord really would have to be with you if I let your children go with you," Pharaoh answered. "Clearly you're planning some kind of evil trick, so no, only the men can go and worship the Lord, because that's what you've been asking for." Then he had Moses and Aaron thrown out. The Lord told Moses, "Lift up your hand over Egypt so that the locusts may swarm over it and eat every plant in the country, everything that was left by the hail." Moses held out his staff over Egypt, and all through that day and night the Lord sent an east wind blowing over the land. By the time morning came, the east wind had brought in the locusts. The locusts swarmed across the land and settled in every part of the country. There had never been such a swarm of locusts ever before, and there won't be ever again. They covered the ground until it looked black, and they ate up all the plants in the fields and all the fruit on the trees that had been left by the hail. Not a single green leaf was left on any tree or plant anywhere in Egypt. Pharaoh called urgently for Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. So please forgive my sin just this one time, and plead with the Lord your God, asking him to at least take away this deathly plague from me." Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. The Lord changed the direction of the wind so that a strong westerly wind blew the locusts into the Red Sea. There wasn't a single locust left anywhere in Egypt. But the Lord made Pharaoh stubborn, and he would not let the Israelites go. The Lord told Moses, "Lift your hand toward the sky so that darkness will fall over Egypt, darkness so thick that it can be felt." Moses lifted up his hand toward heaven, and the whole of Egypt went completely dark for 3 days. No one could see anyone else, and no one moved from where they were for 3 days. But there was still light where all the Israelites lived. Eventually Pharaoh called for Moses. "Go and worship the Lord," he said. "Just leave your flocks and herds here. You can even take your children with you." But Moses replied, "You must also let us have animals for sacrifices and burnt offerings, so we can offer them to the Lord our God. Our livestock have to go with us too. Not a single animal will be left behind. We'll need some of them to worship the Lord our God, and we won't know how we are to worship the Lord until we get there." But the Lord made Pharaoh stubborn, and he would not let them go. Pharaoh shouted at Moses, "Get out of here! I don't want to see you ever again. If I ever do see you again, you'll die." "May it be as you say," Moses replied, "I won't see you again." Exodus chapter 11. The Lord told Moses, "There's one last plague I will bring down on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that he will let you go, but when he does, he'll expel every one of you from the country. Now go and tell the Israelites, both men and women, to ask their Egyptian neighbors for silver and gold objects." The Lord made the Egyptians look favorably on the Israelites. In fact, Moses himself was highly respected in Egypt by both Pharaoh's officials and the ordinary people. Moses said, "This is what the Lord says. Around midnight I will go through the whole of Egypt. Every firstborn son in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne, to the firstborn of the servant girl working with a hand mill, as well as all the firstborn of the cattle. There will be loud cries of mourning all over Egypt, such as have never been before and will never be again. But among all the Israelites there won't even be the sound of a dog barking at them or their animals. That way you will know that the Lord distinguishes between Egypt and Israel. All your officials will come to me, bowing down before me and saying, 'Leave and take everyone who follows you with you. After that I will leave.'" Moses was very angry and left Pharaoh. The Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh is refusing to listen to you, so I can do even more miracles in Egypt." Moses and Aaron did these miracles before Pharaoh, But the Lord gave Pharaoh a stubborn attitude, and he wouldn't let the Israelites leave his country. Exodus chapter 12. The Lord told Moses and Aaron while they were still in Egypt, "This month will be for you the first month of your year. Tell all the Israelites that on the 10th day of this month, every man must choose a lamb for his family, one for each household. However, if the household is too small for a whole lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor may choose a lamb according to the total number of people. Divide up the lamb depending on what everybody can eat. Your lamb must be a year-old male, without any defects, and you can take it either from the sheep or the goats. Keep it until the 14th day of the month, when all the Israelites will slaughter the animals after sunset and before it gets dark. They are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they have the meal. They are to roast the meat over a fire and eat it that night, together with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. You are not to eat the meat raw or boiled in water. All of it must be roasted over a fire, including the head, legs, and its insides. Make sure nothing is left until the morning. If there is anything left over, burn it by morning. This is how you are to eat the meal. You should be dressed ready to travel, with your sandals on your feet and your walking stick in your hand. You are to eat quickly. It is the Lord's Passover. That very night I will go all through Egypt and kill every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring condemnation on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood on the houses where you live will mark them out. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No deathly plague will fall on you to destroy you when I attack Egypt. This will be a day to remember for you. You are to celebrate it as a festival to the Lord for generations to come. You will observe this for all time to come. For 7 days you must eat only bread made without yeast. On the first day you are to get rid of the yeast from your houses. Anyone who eats anything with yeast from the first day to 7th day must be excluded from the Israelite community. On both the first day and on the 7th day, you are to have a holy meeting. You must not work on those days, except to prepare food. That is all you are allowed to do. You are to keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because on this very day I led your tribes by their respective divisions out of Egypt. You are to observe this day for all time to come. In the first month you are to eat bread without yeast from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days there must be no yeast in your houses. If anyone eats something with yeast in it, then they must be excluded from the Israelite community, whether they are a foreigner or native of the land. You must not eat anything with yeast in it. Eat only bread without yeast in all your homes. Then Moses called together all the elders of Israel and told them, "Go immediately and choose a lamb for each of your families and kill the Passover lamb. Get a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some on the top and sides of the doorframe. None of you are to go out through door of the house until morning. When the Lord passes through to punish the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe. He will pass over the door, and he will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses and kill you. You and your descendants are to remember to observe these instructions for all time to come. When you enter the land that the Lord promised to give you, you are to observe this ceremony. When your children come and ask you, 'Why is this ceremony important to you?' you are to tell them, 'This is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord.' He was the one who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he killed the Egyptians but spared our households." The people bowed down in worship. Then the Israelites went and did just as the Lord had told Moses and Aaron. At midnight the Lord killed every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner in the jail, and also all the firstborn of the livestock. Pharaoh got up during the night, as well as all his officials and all the Egyptians. There were loud cries of agony throughout Egypt, because there wasn't a single house where someone hadn't died. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron during the night and told them, "Get out of here. Leave my people, the two of you and the Israelites. Go so you can worship the Lord as you have asked. Take your flocks and herds as well, just like you've said, and leave. Oh, and bless me too." The Egyptians urged the Israelites to leave their country as quickly as possible, saying, "Otherwise we'll all die." So the Israelites picked up their dough before it had risen, and carried it on their shoulders in kneading bowls wrapped in clothing. In addition, the Israelites did what Moses had told them, and asked the Egyptians for objects of silver and gold, and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians look so favorably on the Israelites that they agreed their request. In this way, they took the wealth of the Egyptians. The Israelites set out on foot from Ramesses for Succoth and numbered about 600,000 men, as well as women and children. In addition, many foreigners joined them. They also took with them large herds and flocks of livestock. Since their bread dough didn't have any yeast, the Israelites baked what they had brought out of Egypt into loaves without yeast. This was because when they were driven out of Egypt, they had to leave in a hurry and didn't have time to prepare food for themselves. The Israelites had lived in Egypt for 430 years. On the very day the 430 years ended, all the tribes of the Lord by their respective divisions left Egypt. Because the Lord kept watch that night to lead them out of the land of Egypt, you are to keep watch this same night as an observance to honor the Lord, to be kept by all Israelites for generations to come. The Lord told Moses and Aaron, "This is the Passover ceremony. No foreigner is allowed to eat it, but any slave who has been bought can eat it once you have circumcised him. Foreign visitors or those hired from other nations shall not eat the Passover. It has to be eaten inside the house. You are not allowed to take any of the meat outside the house or to break any of the bones. All Israelites are to celebrate it. If there's a foreigner lives with you and wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover, all the males in their household have to be circumcised. Then he may come and celebrate it, and he shall be treated like a native of the land. But no man who is not circumcised may eat it." The same rule applies to both the native and the foreigner who lives among you. Then all the Israelites followed these instructions. They did exactly what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. That very day, the Lord led the Israelite tribes out of Egypt by their respective tribal divisions. Exodus chapter 13. The Lord told Moses, "Every firstborn male is to be dedicated to me. The firstborn from every Israelite family belongs to me, and also every firstborn animal." So Moses told the people, "Remember, this is the day you left Egypt, the land of your slavery, for the Lord led you out of it by his amazing power. Nothing with yeast in it shall be eaten. Today you are on your way, this day in the month of Abib. The Lord is going to take you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites, the land he promised your forefathers he would give you, a land flowing with milk and honey. So you are to observe this ceremony in this month. For 7 days you are to only eat bread without yeast, and on the 7th day hold a religious festival to honor the Lord. Only bread without yeast is to be eaten during those 7 days. You are not to have any yeast. In fact, there is to be no yeast in any place where you live. On that day tell your children, 'This is because of what the Lord did for me when I left Egypt.' When you celebrate this ceremony, it will be like a sign on your hand and a reminder between your eyes that this teaching of the Lord should be spoken about regularly. For the Lord led you out of Egypt with his great power. That's why you are to observe this ceremony at the proper time every year. Once the Lord takes you into the land of the Canaanites and gives it to you, as he promised you and your forefathers, you are to present to the Lord all firstborn males, human or animal. The firstborn males of your livestock all belong to the Lord. You must buy back every firstborn donkey with a lamb, and if you don't do so, you have to break its neck. You must buy back every firstborn of your sons. When in the future your children come to you and ask, 'Why is this ceremony important to you?' you are to tell them, 'The Lord led us out of Egypt, the land of our slavery, by his amazing power. Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us leave, so the Lord killed every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human and animal. That's the reason why I sacrifice to the Lord the firstborn male of every animal, and I buy back all the firstborn of my sons. In this way it will be like a sign on your hand and a reminder between your eyes, for the Lord led us out of Egypt by his amazing power.' When Pharaoh let the Israelites leave, God did not lead them along the road through the land of the Philistines, even though that was a shorter way. For God said, if they are forced to fight, they might change their minds and go back to Egypt. So God led the people by the longer way through the desert towards the Red Sea. When the Israelites left the land of Egypt, they were like an army ready for battle. Moses carried Joseph's bones with him because Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear a solemn promise, saying, God will definitely take care of you, and then you must take my bones with you when you leave here. They traveled on from Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. The Lord went ahead of them as a pillar of cloud to show them the way during the day, and as a pillar of fire to provide them with light at night. Like this, they could travel by day or night. The pillar of cloud during the day and the pillar of fire at night were always in front of the people. Exodus. Chapter 14. The Lord told Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and set up camp near Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. You are to camp beside the sea, opposite Baal-zephon. Pharaoh will conclude about the Israelites. They're wandering about the country in confusion. The desert has blocked them from leaving. I will give Pharaoh a stubborn attitude so that he will chase after them to get them back. But I will gain respect through what happens to Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did as they were instructed. When the king of Egypt found out that the Israelites had left in a hurry, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about what had happened and said, what have we done? We have let all these Israelite slaves go. So Pharaoh had his chariot made ready and set out with his army. He took 600 of his best chariots along with all the other chariots of Egypt, each with their officer in charge. The Lord gave Pharaoh, king of Egypt, a stubborn attitude, so he chased after the Israelites, who were leaving with their fists raised in triumph. The Egyptians set out in pursuit, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and soldiers. They caught up with the Israelites while they were camped beside the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. The Israelites looked back and saw Pharaoh and the Egyptian army approaching. They were absolutely terrified and cried out to the Lord for help. They complained to Moses, were there no graves in Egypt that you had to bring us out here in the desert to die? What have you done to us by making us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you back in Egypt, leave us alone so that we can go on being slaves to the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to be Egyptian slaves than to die here in the desert. But Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand where you are and you will see how the Lord will save you today. The Egyptians you see right now, you will never see again. The Lord is going to fight for you. You don't need to do anything. The Lord told Moses, why are you crying out to me for help? Tell the Israelites to move forward. You are to pick up your walking stick and hold it out in your hand over the sea. Divide it so the Israelites can walk through the sea on dry ground. I will give Egyptians a stubborn, hard-hearted attitude so that they will chase in after them. Then I will gain respect through what happens to Pharaoh and all his army, chariots, and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain respect through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. The angel of God, who had been leading the Israelites, moved behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front of them and stood behind them, so that it was positioned between the Egyptian and Israelite camps. Though the cloud was in darkness on one side, but it lit up the night on the other. No one from either camp went near the other during the night. Then Moses held out his hand over the sea, and all through the night the Lord forced the sea back with a strong east wind, and turned the bottom of the sea into dry land. So the water was divided, and the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground, with walls of water to their right and left. The Egyptians chased after them, all Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen. They followed the Israelites into the sea. But at the end of the night, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army from the pillar of fire and cloud, and he threw them into a panic. He made their chariot wheels get stuck so it was hard for them to drive. The Egyptians shouted out, retreat, we must run from the Israelites because the Lord is fighting for them against us. Then the Lord told Moses, hold out your hand over the sea so that the water will pour back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." So Moses held out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to normal. As the Egyptians retreated, the Lord swept them into the sea. The water poured back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the whole of Pharaoh's army that had chased after the Israelites into the sea. Not a single one of them survived. But the Israelites had walked through the sea on dry ground, with walls of water to their right and left. The Lord saved the Israelites from the threat of the Egyptians. The Israelites saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. When the Israelites saw the great power that the Lord had used against the Egyptians, they were in awe of the Lord, and they trusted in him and in his servant Moses. Exodus Chapter 15. Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. "I will sing to the Lord, for he is supreme. He has thrown the horses and their riders into the sea. The Lord gives me strength. He is the theme of my song. He saves me. He is my God, and I will praise him. He is my father's God, and I will honor him. The Lord is like a warrior. His name is the Lord. He threw Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea. Pharaoh's best officers were drowned in the Red Sea. The flooding water covered them. They dropped down into the depths like a stone. Your power, Lord, is truly amazing. Your power, Lord, crushed the enemy. By your majestic power, you destroyed those who opposed you. Your anger blazed out and burned them up like stubble. You blew and the sea piled up. The waves stood straight like a wall. The depths of the ocean turned solid. The enemy bragged, "I will chase them and catch up with them. I will divide the plunder. I will eat them alive. I will swing my sword. By my hand I will destroy them." But you blew with your breath and the sea swept over them. They sank down like lead in the swirling waters. Who is like you among the gods, Lord? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in wonder, doing miracles? You acted, and the earth swallowed the Egyptians. You led the people you saved with your trustworthy love. You will guide them in your strength to your holy home. The nations will hear what has happened and will shake with fear. The people who live in Philistia will experience agonizing distress. The Edomite chiefs will be terrified. The Moabite leaders will tremble. The people living in Canaan will melt away in panic. Terror and fright will fall on them. Lord, because of your great power, they will be as still as stone until your people pass by. Until the people you bought pass by. You will take your people and plant them on the mountain that you own, the place that you, Lord, have prepared as your home, the sanctuary that your hands have built, Lord. The Lord will reign forever and ever. When Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the water rushing back over them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Miriam the prophet, Aaron's sister, picked up a tambourine, and all the women followed her dancing and playing tambourines. Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he is supreme. He has thrown the horses and their riders into the sea." Then Moses led Israel away from the Red Sea and into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they walked in the desert but couldn't find any water. When they arrived at Marah, the water there was too bitter to drink. That's why the place is called Marah. So the people complained to Moses, asking, "What are we going to drink?" Moses called out to the Lord for help, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. When he threw it into the water, it became sweet. There the Lord gave them rules and instructions, and also tested their loyalty to him. He told them, "If you pay attention to what the Lord your God says, do what is right in his sight, obey his commands and keep all his regulations, then I will not make you suffer from any of the diseases I gave the Egyptians, because I am the Lord who heals you." Then they traveled on to Elim, which had 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. They set up camp there beside the water.